The highway is quiet in that uneasy way it gets after midnight, when the city feels awake but empty at the same time. Streetlights stretch endlessly ahead, casting pale yellow pools across the asphalt. A black sedan moves smoothly in the right lane, steady speed, no sudden movements. Inside the car, Daniel Carter drives with one hand on the wheel, the other resting calmly near the center console. His face is relaxed, unreadable, trained by years of discipline. He checks his mirror. Red and blue lights burst to life behind him. Daniel exhales once, slow and controlled. He doesn't hesitate, doesn't speed up, doesn't slam the brakes. He signals, eases onto the shoulder, and brings the car to a clean stop beneath a flickering streetlight. The engine hums softly. The world feels suspended. In the mirror, a patrol car stops, unusually close, too close. The driver's door opens hard. A white male officer steps out with sharp, deliberate movements. His posture is aggressive, shoulders squared, jaw tight. His name tag reads Officer Mark Reynolds. Reynolds approaches fast, hand hovering near his weapon, flashlight already cutting through the darkness like a blade. He shines it straight into Daniel's face. "License and registration," Reynolds snaps, not bothering with a greeting. Daniel nods once and reaches slowly, deliberately. He knows the routine. Every movement is visible, predictable, safe. He hands over the documents without a word. Reynolds studies them longer than necessary. His eyes flick from the card to Daniel's face, back and forth, searching for something, fear, maybe. He doesn't find it. He circles the car, flashlights sweeping across the seats, the dashboard, the back window. The beam lingers on Daniel again. "Where you headed?" Reynolds asks. "Home," Daniel replies calmly. "From where?" "Downtown." Reynolds leans in closer, invading space. "You nervous?" Daniel meets his eyes. "No, sir." That answer lands wrong. Reynolds straightens up, irritation flashing across his face. "You rolled through a stop sign back there." Daniel doesn't argue. He knows better. "I don't believe I did." Reynolds' tone hardens. "Step out of the vehicle." Daniel pauses for half a second. Not defiance, just awareness, then opens the door and steps out, hands visible. The cold, night air hits his face. Without warning, Reynolds grabs him and forces him against the hood. The metal is cold, unforgiving. Reynolds twists Daniel's arms back harder than necessary and snaps the cuffs on tight. "What's this for?" Daniel asks evenly. "For your attitude," Reynolds replies. Cars pass slowly, drivers staring, unsure whether to look away or keep watching. Reynolds pats Daniel down aggressively, then steps back, breathing hard. Daniel says nothing now. His silence is intentional. In his jacket pocket, unseen and unnoticed, his phone continues recording, capturing every word, every shove, every lie, while a routine traffic stop quietly transforms into the beginning of a career-ending mistake. Officer Mark Reynolds steps back from the hood, breathing heavier now, irritation simmering just beneath the surface. He keys his radio with unnecessary force. "Dispatch. I've got a suspicious driver refusing to cooperate," he says loudly, making sure the words carry. "Requesting backup." Daniel hears the lie but doesn't react. His hands remain cuffed behind him, fingers relaxed despite the tight metal biting into his wrists. He keeps his eyes forward, posture straight. Experience has taught him that reaction is fuel. Reynolds paces once, then twice, shining his flashlight into the open car again. He pulls at the driver's door, rummaging through the interior without asking, without explaining. The search is sloppy, aggressive, more about dominance than discovery. "What are you looking for?" Daniel asks calmly. Reynolds snaps his head around. "You don't ask the questions." A second patrol car arrives, tires crunching against gravel. A younger officer steps out, cautious, eyes moving between Reynolds and Daniel. He senses tension but doesn't interfere. Rank and tone have already decided the hierarchy. Reynolds points at Daniel. "This guy's being difficult." Daniel turns his head slightly. "I've complied with every instruction." Reynolds steps closer, voice low and sharp. "You think you're smart? You think being calm makes you untouchable?" Daniel doesn't answer. Reynolds opens the trunk, slams it shut, then claims he smells something suspicious. He doesn't say what, He doesn't need to. Ambiguity gives him room. "Spread your feet," Reynolds orders. He shoves Daniel's legs apart and pats him down again, harder this time, pressing just enough to provoke a reaction. Daniel exhales slowly, controlling the surge of anger. Reynolds notices the restraint and mistakes it for weakness. "You people always think you know your rights," Reynolds mutters under his breath. The younger officer shifts uncomfortably but stays silent. Reynolds radios again, exaggerating. Subject continues to resist verbally. Daniel looks straight ahead. "I am not resisting." "That's enough." Reynolds grabs Daniel by the arm and pulls him toward the cruiser. He opens the back door and forces Daniel inside, his head narrowly missing the frame. The door slams shut with finality. Reynolds stands there for a moment, chest rising and falling, then turns to the younger officer. "I'm arresting him for obstruction." "For what exactly?" the officer asks carefully. Reynolds glares. "You questioning me?" The officer looks away. As the cruiser pulls onto the road, Reynolds narrates his version into the camera, controlled, rehearsed, confident. He lists charges like checkboxes, shaping reality into something that justifies his behavior. In the back seat, Daniel stares forward, listening. He notes every inconsistency, every lie, every timestamp. His silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. Because Reynolds believes this night is about authority. Daniel knows it's about exposure. The holding area smells of disinfectant and old metal. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting a harsh white glow that makes everything feel colder than it already is. Daniel sits on a narrow bench, hands cuffed in front of him now, posture upright, eyes calm. Around him, the station moves on as if he's already been forgotten. An officer walks past and slides a clipboard through the bars. "Sit tight," he says without looking. Daniel nods. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't complain. Silence is protection. What none of them realize is that Daniel Carter isn't just another name on a booking sheet. He's spent years in rooms like this, not as a detainee, but as an investigator. He knows the rhythms of police stations, the way power shifts once doors close. He knows which cameras work and which mysteriously fail. He knows how reports are written before facts are decided. In his pocket, his phone is still warm from recording. The app automatically encrypted the audio the moment the cuffs went on. The file already exists in 2 places beyond this building. Daniel doesn't check it. He doesn't need to. He trusts the system he built. Across the room, Officer Reynolds stands at a desk, typing aggressively. Daniel watches his reflection in the glass. Reynolds' shoulders are relaxed now. This part gives him comfort. Words are easier to control than people. Daniel remembers similar cases, drivers pulled over late at night, charges inflated, behavior exaggerated. He's seen how those stories end when no one is watching. That's why he stays calm now. Panic creates mistakes. Reynolds is already making enough on his own. An officer approaches to fingerprint Daniel. The scanner beeps. A screen flashes his name. The officer pauses. "Just for a second. You ever been arrested before?" he asks. "No," Daniel replies. The officer studies him briefly, then continues. The moment passes. Daniel is led back to the bench. Time stretches. Minutes blur together. He thinks about the report being written, the language already locking itself into official record. He thinks about the younger officer at the scene, the hesitation in his eyes, the silence that might haunt him later. Eventually, Daniel speaks. "I want to make a phone call, and I want a lawyer." A clerk sighs, annoyed but nods. "We'll get to it." Reynolds glances over from his desk, irritation flickering across his face. He thinks Daniel is posturing. He thinks this is where fear sets in. He's wrong. Daniel doesn't call family. He doesn't call a friend. He dials a number he knows by memory, one that isn't listed in any contact log. When the call connects, Daniel keeps his voice low and steady. "It's me," he says. "Traffic stop escalated. Evidence is recording. Location logged." There's a brief pause. "Understood," the voice replies. "Do not identify yourself. We'll handle it." Daniel ends the call and sits back down. From the outside, he looks like every other man waiting to be processed. But the wheels are already turning. And Officer Mark Reynolds has no idea that the man he arrested tonight is the one who will dismantle him. Officer Mark Reynolds believes paperwork is where control is restored. Out on the street, things can get messy, voices raised, bystanders watching, body cameras blinking. But inside the station, behind a desk, with a keyboard and a badge number, he feels untouchable. Reports turn chaos into clean paragraphs. Once written, they become truth. He cracks his knuckles and starts typing. Subject displayed aggressive behavior. Reynolds pauses, thinking. He didn't. Not really. But close enough. He adds more. Refused lawful commands. Appeared nervous. Reached toward waistband. He doesn't look at the holding area while he writes. If he did, he might notice how still Daniel is, how alert. Reynolds knows which words justify force. He's used them before. Training manuals don't teach it, but experience does. Certain phrases raise fewer questions. Certain details shut down complaints before they begin. At a nearby desk, Officer Lisa Hernandez skims the draft on her screen. She's been asked to review it before submission. Her brow tightens slightly. You say he reached for his waistband, she says. I didn't see that on the Bodycam. Reynolds shrugs without looking up. Camera angle missed it. Hernandez hesitates. She's been on the job long enough to know how this goes. Pushing back now means tension later. Maybe worse. She scrolls further. You also wrote hostile tone, she adds. He was argumentative, Reynolds snaps. You heard him. Hernandez did hear him. Calm, measured, almost polite. She exhales quietly and says nothing more. The cursor blinks at the end of the paragraph. Reynolds hits save. Across the station, Daniel is escorted to an interview room, 4 walls, a table bolted to the floor, a single camera in the corner. The door clicks shut behind him. Alone now, Daniel looks directly at the lens. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence is enough. The camera records everything, his posture, the lack of agitation, the absence of threat. This room will tell its own story later. Minutes later, Reynolds enters, carrying a folder. He sits, spreading papers across the table like cards in a game he believes he's already won. Let's clear this up, Reynolds says. You were non-compliant. That's why we're here. Daniel meets his eyes. I followed every instruction. Reynolds smirks. That's not how it reads. He taps the report. Ink over truth. Daniel remains silent, letting the contradiction hang in the air. Silence makes people talk. Reynolds continues. Filling the space, he explains the charges. Obstruction, failure to comply, suspicion of possession later dismissed, he assures. Daniel finally speaks. I want my attorney present. Reynolds leans back, annoyed. Suit yourself. Makes it harder on you. He stands and leaves, confident. The door closes again. What Reynolds doesn't realize is that the paper trail he's building is already colliding with another one, timestamps, GPS data, audio logs, and video angles he didn't know existed. Every word he typed is about to be tested against something far stronger than his badge. And this time, the paperwork won't protect him. By morning, the arrest has been processed, logged, and reduced to a case number. To the department, it's routine. To Officer Mark Reynolds, it's finished. He's already moved on. Convinced the paperwork will do what it always does, carry the weight for him. The charges are filed with minimal review. Obstruction, resisting without violence, failure to comply, flexible labels, broad enough to survive casual scrutiny. The prosecutor assigned to the case skims the report, notes the Bodycam reference, and schedules an arraignment. Nothing stands out. Nothing demands attention. Daniel is released later that day. No apology, no explanation. A clerk hands him his belongings and tells him he's free to go. Daniel thanks her and walks out into the daylight. The sun feels too bright after hours under fluorescent lights. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't rush to clear his name publicly. Instead, he goes home and gets to work. Daniel opens his laptop and begins organizing files. Audio from the stop, metadata from the phone, GPS coordinates, timestamps accurate to the second. He cross-references everything with publicly available dashcam footage and traffic cameras near the stop location. The alignment is precise. The lies are already visible. He compiles the evidence into a clean, chronological package. No commentary, no emotion, just facts. By evening, the file is transmitted through a secure channel. The confirmation arrives minutes later. Received. That's all it says. It's enough. Back at the precinct, Reynolds jokes with other officers. He talks about the stop like it was nothing, exaggerating Daniel's attitude for laughs. No one challenges him. No one asks questions. That silence reinforces his confidence. But small things begin to shift. An email arrives requesting unedited Bodycam footage. Another asks for clarification on the timeline. Reynolds responds casually, unconcerned. He's answered these requests before. He believes compliance equals safety. At home, Daniel prepares for court, not emotionally, strategically. He hires private counsel experienced in federal oversight cases. He instructs them to say nothing yet. Let the process unfold. The arraignment comes and goes quickly. Daniel pleads not guilty. Reynolds watches from the back of the room, unimpressed. He thinks he knows how this ends. What he doesn't see is the parallel case forming beyond the courtroom, internal reviews, flagged reports, and a growing list of stops tied to his name. Data doesn't care about confidence. It only counts. Daniel sits quietly, hands folded, eyes forward. He doesn't look at Reynolds. He doesn't need to, because the case Reynolds thinks he built is already cracking under its own weight. And when it breaks, it won't be because of emotion or protest. It will be because the truth was documented carefully, patiently, and completely. The days after the arraignment pass without noise. No media, no statements, no leaks. On the surface, Daniel Carter looks like any other defendant waiting for a court date. He goes to work. He shops for groceries. He answers his lawyer's emails with short, precise replies. Nothing about him suggests urgency. That's exactly how he wants it. Behind closed doors, the case is moving faster than Reynolds could imagine. Daniel meets with two people in a nondescript federal office, miles away from the courthouse. No signs on the door. No names exchanged aloud. Credentials are checked once, then never mentioned again. Daniel hands over a hard drive and a printed index. Every file is labeled, every timeline verified. Nothing is speculative. The agents listen. They don't interrupt. They don't react. They don't need to. What Daniel provides isn't just evidence of one bad stop. It's a pattern dozens of similar encounters pulled from public records, complaints, and footage requests that went nowhere. Stops that escalated without cause. Charges that collapsed quietly. Bodycam gaps that align too cleanly to be accidental. Reynolds' name keeps appearing. The agents exchange looks. One of them finally nods and closes the folder. This goes higher, he says. Daniel already knows. From that moment on, the case splits into two tracks. In state court, Reynolds continues preparing to testify, confident the local system will protect him. In federal offices, analysts begin dissecting years of his conduct, frame by frame, report by report. Requests are sent to the department routine on paper, urgent in intent. Unedited footage, training records, prior complaints, use of force reviews. Supervisors respond slowly at first, unaware of the scope, but delays only deepen suspicion. Reynolds notices the shift before anyone explains it. His sergeant asks more questions than usual. Internal Affairs schedules a meeting, then reschedules it. A captain requests copies of reports Reynolds thought were closed forever. Still, no one tells him why. Daniel stays silent. He doesn't attend protests. He doesn't post online. He understands something Reynolds doesn't. Loud reactions create defenses. Quiet ones remove them. Weeks later, the prosecutor assigned to Daniel's case receives a sealed envelope. Inside is a notice of federal interest and a request to preserve all materials immediately. The prosecutor rereads it twice, then locks it in a drawer. That night, Reynolds sleeps poorly. He tells himself it's stress. Everyone feels it sometimes. He replays the stop in his head, convincing himself he followed procedure. He did what he always does, and it's always worked. What he doesn't realize is that the system he relied on is now watching him the same way he once watched drivers on empty streets, patiently, closely, and without announcing itself. Daniel sits at his kitchen table, reviewing tomorrow's schedule. He checks off tasks, closes his laptop, and turns off the light. The reveal hasn't happened yet, but it's already irreversible. Officer Mark Reynolds has always trusted routine. Routine kept him safe. Routine kept complaints quiet. Routine kept supervisors predictable. But now, routine starts slipping in small, irritating ways that he can't fully explain. It begins with paperwork. A request comes down asking for copies of past traffic stops, older ones, the kind nobody ever revisits. Reynolds prints them out without concern, but the volume bothers him. 10 stops, then 20. Then, a request for Bodycam footage he knows is incomplete. He considers asking why, then decides not to. Questions attract attention. At roll call, conversations stop when he walks in. Not abruptly, just enough to be noticeable. A few officers avoid eye contact. Others look at him too long. Reynolds tells himself he's imagining it. Paranoia is a weakness, and he doesn't allow himself weaknesses. Internal Affairs finally schedules the meeting. The email is polite, neutral, no accusations. Just a request for availability. Reynolds replies within minutes, choosing a time that projects confidence. He even jokes about it with another officer, laughing louder than necessary. Inside, the joke doesn't land. The IA interview room is smaller than he expects. No windows, 2 chairs on one side of the table, one on the other. The investigators don't introduce themselves beyond their names. They don't mention Daniel Carter. They don't need to. They ask about procedure, why Reynolds positions his body the way he does during stops, why his camera seems obstructed at specific moments, why his reports often include identical phrasing across unrelated incidents. Reynolds answers smoothly, citing training, safety, and discretion. The investigators nod. They take notes. They don't argue. That silence unsettles him. When the meeting ends, they thank him for his time and remind him not to discuss the interview with anyone. As Reynolds stands to leave, one investigator adds casually, "We may follow up." Back on patrol, Reynolds feels watched for the first time in his career, not by suspects, but by the system itself. Dispatch checks in more often. Supervisors ride along unexpectedly. His body cam is reviewed with a level of scrutiny he's never experienced. He pulls fewer cars over. He speaks less. Control begins slipping, and that scares him. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter remains invisible. He attends no hearings beyond what's required. He doesn't contact Reynolds. He doesn't push the timeline. He knows pressure works best when it builds naturally, when the person under it starts making mistakes on their own. Behind the scenes, federal analysts finish assembling the case. They cross-reference Reynolds' stops with civil complaints, disciplinary files, and regional arrest data. Patterns harden into conclusions. The scope expands beyond one officer to supervision failures, reporting gaps, and ignored warnings. A quiet decision is made. Reynolds' upcoming court testimony will proceed as planned. No intervention, no warning. Because once he speaks under oath, everything else will fall faster. Reynolds reviews his notes the night before court, confident he can control the narrative. He has always been good at that. He practices answers aloud, correcting tone and posture, unaware that every version contradicts a recording already logged and time-stamped. Daniel, miles away, closes a folder labeled simply with a case number. Inside, every lie Reynolds plans to tell has already been mapped. The pressure is no longer building. It's ready to collapse. The courtroom feels colder than Daniel remembers, not physically, emotionally. The kind of cold that comes from routine injustice dressed up as procedure. Wooden benches, neutral walls, a flag hanging behind the judge's seat. Everything designed to suggest order, even when truth is optional. Daniel sits quietly at the defense table, hands folded, eyes forward. He wears a plain suit, no pin, no badge, nothing to distinguish him from any other defendant. That's intentional. Let them underestimate him one last time. Across the room, Officer Mark Reynolds waits with the confidence of someone who has done this many times. He leans back slightly, one arm resting on the chair beside him, posture relaxed. He's testified before. He knows the rhythm. Speak clearly. Stick to the report. Let the uniform do the convincing. The prosecutor calls the case. A routine charge, disorderly conduct, failure to comply. The words sound thin even as they're read aloud, but Reynolds isn't worried. Thin charges still hold when no one pushes back. The judge enters. Everyone stands. Everyone sits. Testimony begins. Reynolds takes the stand first. He raises his right hand, swears to tell the truth, and settles in. His voice is steady as he describes the traffic stop. He claims Daniel was nervous, claims his hands moved too much, claims he feared for his safety. He explains the arrest as necessary, unavoidable, textbook. He doesn't look at Daniel while he speaks. Instead, he looks at the jury, at the judge, at the ceiling, anywhere but the man whose life he tried to rewrite. Daniel listens carefully, not because he needs to, but because timing matters. He notes each exaggeration, each invented detail, each pause where Reynolds fills silence with confidence. The lies stack neatly, just as expected. When the prosecutor finishes, the defense attorney stands. He doesn't challenge Reynolds immediately. He asks small questions, clarifying ones, about camera angles, about training, about why certain moments aren't visible on the Bodycam. Reynolds answers smoothly, blaming equipment, positioning, safety protocols. Then the attorney stops. Your Honor, he says calmly, the defense would like to introduce additional evidence. Reynolds' head lifts slightly. The prosecutor looks confused. We weren't notified. The judge raises a hand. Proceed. A monitor is rolled into place. Daniel doesn't move. The first audio clip plays. Reynolds' voice fills the courtroom, not the polished version from the stand, but the raw one from the street. Threats. Mocking laughter. Warnings, delivered in a whisper, meant to intimidate. The room shifts. People lean forward. Reynolds stiffens. The second clip plays. A gap in the Bodycam footage, filled perfectly by Daniel's phone recording. Timestamps align. Metadata appears on screen. The defense attorney doesn't speak. He lets the evidence talk. By the time the judge calls for a pause, Reynolds' confident posture has collapsed inward. His breathing changes. His eyes dart toward the monitor, then away. Daniel remains still. The setup is complete. Now comes the exposure. The courtroom no longer feels neutral. What was once orderly now vibrates with tension, as if the walls themselves are reacting to what's being revealed. The judge leans forward, elbows resting on the bench, eyes fixed on the screen. The jury sits frozen. No one whispers. No one shifts. Every sound coming from the speakers cuts too clean to ignore. Another recording plays. This time it's Reynolds laughing. Not loudly, not casually. It's the low, satisfied sound of someone certain they hold power and won't be questioned. The laughter is followed by his voice tightening, issuing commands that contradict everything he testified to minutes earlier. The difference between the officer on the stand and the officer on the street is undeniable. The defense attorney pauses the playback. Officer Reynolds, he says evenly, is that your voice? Reynolds swallows. His mouth opens, then closes. For a moment, he looks like he might argue. He has argued his way out of worse before. But the timestamps are still visible. The waveform's still frozen on the screen. The judge is watching him closely now. Yes, Reynolds says finally. His voice cracks. The attorney nods. So when you testified that the defendant was aggressive, that's not what I meant. Reynolds cuts in too fast. The judge raises a hand. Answer the question. Reynolds exhales. Yes, that's my voice. The defense continues, methodical and precise. He plays another clip. This one captures Reynolds fabricating justification for the arrest, muttering about charges that always stick and how paperwork can make it clean. The courtroom absorbs the words in stunned silence. The prosecutor shifts uncomfortably. The judge stops the playback again. Officer, did you fabricate any part of your report? Reynolds looks at the floor. Seconds pass. I followed procedure, he says weakly. The judge's voice hardens. That was not the question. The defense attorney stands, holding up a printed transcript. He reads Reynolds' own words aloud, slowly, without emphasis. There's no need for dramatics. The truth is heavy enough on its own. A juror covers her mouth. Reynolds' attorney whispers urgently in his ear. But it's too late. The damage is already public, already permanent. Daniel finally lifts his eyes, not in triumph, but in recognition. This is the moment he prepared for. The moment where the system, slow and resistant, is forced to acknowledge what happened. The judge clears his throat. Based on the evidence presented, he says, this court finds serious credibility issues with the arresting officer's testimony. He pauses, then continues. The charges against Mr. Carter are dismissed effective immediately. A murmur ripples through the room. But the judge isn't finished. This court is also ordering the immediate referral of this matter to Internal Affairs and federal investigators for further review. Reynolds' face drains of color. The badge on his chest suddenly looks heavy, like it's pulling him downward. Daniel stands as the judge exits, the weight of months lifting without celebration. There is no victory speech, no confrontation. Just truth, finally acknowledged, echoing in a room that can never unhear it. And for Officer Reynolds, the silence that follows is louder than any accusation. The courtroom empties faster than Reynolds expects. People don't linger to look at him. They don't point or whisper. They simply leave, carrying the weight of what they've witnessed with quiet efficiency. That hurts more than outrage ever could. Outrage would mean argument. This feels like a verdict already accepted. Reynolds remains seated for a moment, hands gripping the edge of the table. His attorney murmurs something about next steps, appeals, damage control. The words slide past him without sticking. His attention is fixed on the badge pinned to his uniform. For years, it meant authority. Now it feels like evidence. Two uniformed officers approach, not aggressively, not apologetically, just professionally. Officer Reynolds, one says, voice neutral, we need you to come with us. Reynolds stands. His movements are slower now, cautious. Cameras click from the back of the courtroom. He avoids them instinctively, the way suspects always had. The irony isn't lost on him, and it stings. In a small administrative office, a supervisor waits. Captain Lewis doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. This is pending investigation, Lewis says, sliding a document across the desk. Effective immediately. You're placed on administrative leave. Reynolds stares at the paper. The words blur together, but one line stands out clearly. Surrender badge and service weapon. His jaw tightens. This is temporary, he says, more to himself than anyone else. Lewis meets his gaze. That depends. Reynolds unclips the badge slowly, placing it on the desk. The metal makes a soft sound as it hits the wood. Small. Final. He removes the weapon next, laying it beside the badge. He feels exposed the moment it leaves his hip. Outside, reporters gather. Questions are shouted. Reynolds keeps his head down as he's escorted through a side exit, away from the front steps he once walked with confidence. A cruiser door opens, not for transport, but for separation. He sits alone in the back seat anyway, staring out the window as the building disappears behind him. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter signs paperwork in a quiet office across town. A federal agent thanks him for his cooperation, hands him a copy of the dismissal. Daniel nods, accepting it without comment. Justice, when it finally arrives, rarely feels dramatic. By the end of the week, the department issues a statement. Neutral language, ongoing investigation, commitment to transparency. Reynolds' name appears only once, buried in careful phrasing. Internal Affairs expands the scope. Supervisors are interviewed. Old complaints resurface. Patterns that were once dismissed now look deliberate. Reynolds' reports are pulled one by one, compared against footage and timestamps. The confidence he once relied on becomes a liability. Reynolds watches it unfold from his living room, news playing softly in the background. His phone buzzes less each day. Colleagues stop calling. The uniform hangs untouched in the closet. For the first time in his career, consequences aren't theoretical. They're moving, and they're gaining speed. Time moves differently after exposure. Not faster, not slower, just heavier. Every day carries a weight that didn't exist before, especially for those left in the quiet space after the headlines fade. Daniel Carter feels it first. In the weeks following the court dismissal, requests for interviews pour in. Journalists, advocacy groups, even independent filmmakers want his voice, his face, his story. He declines them all, not out of fear, but out of purpose. He never wanted attention. He wanted documentation. Attention passes. Records remain. He returns to work quietly. Different office, different role, same mission. His superiors acknowledge the case without ceremony. The evidence speaks for itself. Internal briefings reference it as a procedural failure, though everyone understands it was more than that. Training materials are updated. Bodycam policies are tightened. The language is careful, but the impact is real. Changes happen where cameras don't reach. Across the city, Officer Mark Reynolds exists in limbo. Administrative leave stretches into months. Internal affairs interviews grow longer, sharper. Questions stop being about one stop and start becoming about a pattern. Why certain neighborhoods? Why certain drivers? Why certain phrases repeated across reports, like copied code? Reynolds' lawyer advises patience. Silence. Cooperation. Reynolds tries, but the loss of control eats at him. He replays moments in his head, searching for the point where he could have pivoted, softened, stopped. He doesn't find it. He never planned to stop. Friends avoid the topic when they meet. Some avoid him altogether. The department he defended so fiercely now communicates only through official channels. He's no longer part of the inside conversation. At night, Reynolds scrolls through forums and comment sections, reading opinions about officers like him. He tells himself they don't understand policing, that they weren't there, that context matters. But the recordings don't lie. Meanwhile, civil attorneys begin contacting Daniel. Class actions are discussed. Broader implications. Daniel listens but remains selective. His goal was exposure, not spectacle. Still, he understands momentum. The case opened a door, and others are stepping through it. Complaints once dismissed are reopened. Names surface. Supervisors who ignored warnings now answer questions under oath. Policy memos are rewritten with urgency. The department holds town halls. Apologies are issued carefully, measured for legal impact rather than sincerity. Daniel attends none of it. He watches from a distance, ensuring the process doesn't quietly stall. Accountability, he knows, isn't a moment, it's maintenance. For Reynolds, the isolation becomes complete when the final notice arrives. The investigation has concluded. Findings attached. Recommendations listed. His attorney calls, voice subdued. They're moving toward termination. Reynolds sits in silence long after the call ends. No badge, no backup, no narrative left to control. The system he once manipulated didn't collapse. It turned, and now it's moving without him. The termination notice arrives without drama, which somehow makes it worse. No knock on the door, no phone call. Just a plain envelope stamped with the department seal, sitting among unpaid bills and unopened mail. Officer Mark Reynolds recognizes it instantly. His hands hesitate before opening it. Not because he hopes the outcome has changed, but because reading it makes everything permanent. The language is precise and unemotional. Findings sustained. Conduct unbecoming. Abuse of authority. Falsification of official reports. Termination. Effective immediately. The letter thanks him for his service at the end, a line added by policy rather than sentiment. Reynolds reads it twice, searching for something he can argue with. There is nothing. Every conclusion traces back to his own words, his own actions, recorded and preserved without mercy. He folds the letter carefully and places it on the table. The room feels smaller now, like it's closing in. For years his identity was tied to a badge, a radio, a role that gave him control. Without it, He feels undefined, invisible. Clearing out his locker is the final formality. A supervisor he barely knows escorts him through the station. The hallway smells the same. The noise is familiar, but no one stops to talk. Officers glance up, then look away. Not out of hostility, out of discomfort. He is a reminder of something they'd rather not examine too closely. The locker holds fewer personal items than he expected. Gloves, a notebook filled with shorthand and report fragments, a photo tucked into the corner, faded from time. He places everything into the provided box. When he closes it, the sound echoes louder than it should. He turns in his key, signs the last form, walks out the side entrance. Outside, the city doesn't react. Traffic continues. Sirens pass in the distance. Life moves forward without acknowledging his fall. Reynolds stands there for a moment, unsure where to go next, then walks to his car. There's no one waiting, no confrontation, just Kiet. Across town, Daniel Carter reviews the final closure memo on his screen. The case is complete, outcomes documented, policy changes noted. He forwards the file to federal archives, labeling it with care. To him, this isn't an ending, it's a reference point. Proof that documentation matters, that patience works. Daniel never sought to destroy a career. He sought accountability. What followed was the system correcting itself, slowly and imperfectly, but visibly. Months later, new training protocols are quietly implemented. Oversight increases. Complaints are reviewed with sharper eyes. The change isn't loud, but it's real. Reynolds applies for work outside law enforcement. Interviews end quickly once background checks begin. The authority he once relied on no longer protects him. It follows him instead. Daniel continues his work, blending back into the spaces where truth is gathered quietly, without spectacle. He doesn't revisit the case often. He doesn't need to. The record exists. And sometimes, that's the most powerful ending there is.